Not the kind of woman who makes a scene. Never have been. I raised my son in a house where we didn't raise our voices, didn't slam doors, didn't say the thing we'd regret later just because we felt it burning in our chest. My mother taught me that. Her mother taught her. You carry yourself with dignity, or you don't carry yourself at all. So when my daughter-in-law leaned close to me in the church lobby, 20 minutes before my son's promotion ceremony in front of the flower arrangements I had helped pay for, and said, quietly, like she was doing me a favor, "Please don't bring up how you used to support Daniel. It makes him uncomfortable in front of his colleagues." I didn't say anything. I just looked at her, and then I looked down at the program in my hand, the one with my son's name printed on it in gold letters, and I thought, I have been invisible in this family for so long that they've forgotten I can see. I want to tell you how I got there. Because this didn't start in that church lobby. It started 23 years ago in a hospital room in Dayton, Ohio, where I held my son's hand while his wife was in labor. And I promised myself I would do whatever it took. My name is not important. What's important is that I am 64 years old. I worked as a hospital administrator for 31 years, and I spent the better part of 2 decades making sure my son had everything he needed to become the man standing in that church in a new suit. Daniel was 26 when he married Christine. I liked her at first. She was sharp, ambitious, the kind of woman who remembered details. She'd ask about a coworker I'd mentioned months earlier, or notice that I'd rearranged the furniture in my living room. I took that as warmth. I understand now it was inventory. Daniel had just started at the logistics firm when they got married. Entry-level, modest salary, student loans from his graduate degree still following him around like a shadow. Christine came from a family with money. Not enormous money, but the kind that means you never had to worry growing up. The kind that teaches you a certain way of holding your chin. I didn't come from that. I grew up in a small town in eastern Kentucky. Daughter of a coal miner who died at 53 and a mother who cleaned other people's houses until her hands gave out. I worked my way through community college, then transferred, then built a career one careful step at a time. I am proud of that. I have always been proud of that. Christine's family was not impressed by it. The first Thanksgiving, her mother asked me, very pleasantly, what part of Ohio I was from. When I said Dayton, she smiled and said, "Oh, we're more Cincinnati people." As if that explained something. As if geography was character. I let it go. You do, in the beginning. You tell yourself it's nerves or unfamiliarity or just the friction of 2 families learning each other. You give people time. I gave them years. When their daughter, my granddaughter, was born, they named her Lily. I was there. I drove 6 hours each way every month for the first year to help with night feedings when Christine went back to work. I paid for the crib, the stroller, the baby monitor that Christine had circled in a magazine and left on the kitchen counter like a suggestion. I bought it without being asked. That was how I operated. I watched, I noticed. I filled the gaps quietly. When Daniel's firm went through layoffs and he came close to losing his job, I transferred money into their account, not a loan. I never called it a loan. It was $30,000 over 14 months, and I never brought it up once. Not to Daniel, not to Christine, not to anyone. Because that's what you do when it's family. You don't keep score. But Christine kept score. I know that now. She just kept a different ledger than I did. There were small things, always small things. The way Christine would redirect conversations at dinner when I started talking about my work. The way she'd say, "Oh, that's interesting," in a tone that meant she'd already moved on. The way she referred to me to her friends. I heard it once at a birthday party as Daniel's mom from Dayton, as if my name were simply a geography. My granddaughter Lily was the reason I kept showing up. She was a bright, curious girl who used to fall asleep on my shoulder during long car rides and ask me questions about things I'd forgotten adults stopped wondering about. Why is the sky different colors at sunset? Whether fish dream. What my mother's name was and what she was like. I told her everything. She listened like it mattered. When Lily started school, I offered to cover a portion of the tuition for the private elementary school Christine had decided on. Daniel called me to talk through it, and I could hear in his voice that he was embarrassed to ask. I told him not to be. I said, "This is what I saved for." I meant it. I had a separate account, one I'd been putting money into since Daniel graduated college, for exactly this kind of thing. The total I contributed over the years: tuition, the down payment assistance on their house in Columbus, the surgery Lily needed on her ear when she was 7, and their insurance fell short, came to somewhere just over $110,000. I didn't count it at the time. I only know because my accountant mentioned it once, gently, in the context of my own retirement planning. I was not poor, but I was not wealthy either. That money was my careful life, converted into something I hoped would last. They moved to Columbus when Daniel was promoted the first time, about 5 years into his career. The distance made visits less frequent, and I noticed, gradually, that I was the one initiating them. I was the one calling on Sundays. I was the one driving up, staying in their guest room, bringing things. A pie, a book Lily had wanted, new dish towels for the kitchen because I'd noticed Christine's were fraying. I brought things because arriving empty-handed felt like admitting I had no reason to be there. Then Daniel got the news. Director of Operations, regional level. It was a real achievement. I knew how hard he'd worked for it. I cried when he called me, not because I was surprised, but because I remembered the version of him who used to sit at my kitchen table doing homework at 11 o'clock at night. And I felt so much love for both of them, the boy he'd been and the man he'd become. The firm was holding a formal recognition ceremony, a dinner and ceremony at a hotel ballroom in Columbus. Colleagues and their spouses, some regional executives. Daniel called and invited me. He sounded genuinely happy when I said yes. I bought a new dress. Navy blue, appropriate, not flashy. I had my hair done. I drove up the day before and spent the night in their guest room, and that evening Christine was pleasant, almost warm. We had dinner together, the 4 of us, and Lily showed me a project she'd done at school about the ocean, and I felt, for a moment, that particular quiet happiness of being exactly where you're supposed to be. The next afternoon, we drove to the hotel together. Daniel and Christine in the front seat, me in the back, next to Lily, who had fallen asleep against my arm before we even got on the highway. I should have noticed Christine's mood. She'd been on her phone since we left the house. Quiet in the particular way that means something is being decided. But I was watching the way the evening light came through the window onto Lily's hair, and I wasn't paying attention to the right things. The lobby of the hotel was full of people in formal wear, glasses of wine already circulating on trays. Daniel went immediately to greet his manager. Christine steered me toward the edge of the room, where a table held the event programs and name cards. That's when she turned to me. She didn't raise her voice. She smiled, actually, which is something I keep coming back to. She said it like a reminder, like she was helping me avoid an awkward situation. She said, "Please don't bring up how you used to support Daniel financially. It makes him uncomfortable in front of his colleagues. Tonight is about his hard work, and we don't want anything to cloud that." I looked at her for a long moment. I thought about $30,000 over 14 months. I thought about 6-hour drives and night feedings and a surgery that her insurance wouldn't cover. I thought about $110,000 of my careful life. I thought about my mother, who cleaned other people's houses until her hands gave out, and what she would say if she could see me standing in a hotel lobby being told not to remind anyone that I existed. I said, "I understand." She smiled again, satisfied, and went to find Daniel. I stood there for another minute. I looked around the room, the people talking, laughing, the centerpieces, the gold lettering on the banner above the stage that had my son's name on it. I thought about sitting through that dinner, smiling at people I didn't know. not mentioning the things I wasn't supposed to mention, taking up exactly as much space as Christine had decided I was allowed. I picked up my clutch from the table. I walked back through the lobby, out through the glass doors, and I sat down on a bench outside the hotel entrance. The evening air was cooler than I expected. There was a fountain nearby, running, the sound of water covering everything else. I sat there for a while, and I didn't cry. That surprised me a little, that I didn't cry. I just felt very still, the way a house feels after everyone has left. I called a car. I went back to their house. I packed my bag. I left my key to the guest room on the kitchen counter, and I drove home to Dayton. I drove the whole 6 hours that night. I got home at 2 in the morning, and I sat in my own kitchen, and I made a cup of tea, and I looked at the familiar things on my shelves. The photographs, the small ceramic bowl my mother had left me, the books I'd read 3 times each, and I thought clearly, for the first time in a long time, about what I actually wanted. Daniel called the next morning. I didn't answer. He called twice more that day, and then Christine called once, and I didn't answer that either. A text came through from Daniel that evening. "Mom, I don't know what happened. Christine said you didn't feel well. Please call me." I set the phone face down on the table. I had an appointment with my attorney the following week. I didn't cancel it. I sat across from her, and I went through my will, which I hadn't updated in 6 years. I made changes. The college fund I'd been contributing to for Lily, still in my name, still at my discretion, I redirected. I'd been planning to transfer it to her parents' account when she turned 12, which was next year. I changed those instructions. The money would go into a protected trust for Lily directly, accessible to her at 22, managed by a neutral trustee, not accessible to Daniel or Christine under any circumstances before that date. I also changed other allocations. There was a not insignificant amount that had previously been directed toward Daniel's household. I redirected it, some to my sister, some to a nursing scholarship fund at the hospital where I'd worked for 3 decades, some I kept. I did not tell Daniel any of this. 3 weeks passed. He left messages, plural. He drove to Dayton one Saturday and knocked on my door, and I opened it. Because he is my son, and I am not the kind of woman who doesn't open the door. He stood on my porch in a jacket I didn't recognize, his hands in his pockets, and he looked, honestly, confused, like someone had moved a piece of furniture he'd always walked around without thinking. He said, "Mom, what happened? Talk to me." I said, "Come in." I made coffee. We sat at the same kitchen table where he'd done homework at 11 o'clock at night. I told him, calmly and without raising my voice, what Christine had said to me in that hotel lobby. I said it plainly, the way you repeat a fact, not a wound. I watched his face while I talked. He went quiet for a long time. He said, "She didn't. She was just nervous. About the event. She didn't mean it the way it sounded." I said, "Daniel, I know what I heard." He said, "You've always been sensitive about the class stuff, Mom. About where you grew up. Christine doesn't think about it the way you do." I want to tell you that I was surprised he said that, but I wasn't, entirely. I'd been watching him slowly absorb Christine's way of seeing things for years, the way you absorb anything you're surrounded by long enough. I wasn't angry. I was tired in a deep way, the kind of tired that has settled into something permanent. I said, "I'm not sensitive, Daniel. I'm accurate." He left an hour later without us resolving anything. He hugged me at the door and I let him, and I watched him walk to his car and back out of the driveway, and I thought, I love you, and I am no longer going to arrange my life around being tolerated. Christine called the following Tuesday. I answered because I wanted to hear what she would say. She apologized. It was a careful apology, the kind constructed to cover the exit while leaving nothing admitted. She said she hadn't meant to imply anything, that she was just nervous about Daniel's image with his colleagues, that she'd said it wrong. I listened to the whole thing. When she finished, I said, "Thank you for calling." Nothing else. She waited a moment and then said, "I hope we can put this behind us, for Lily's sake." I said, I would never do anything that wasn't in Lily's best interest. Which was true. Which was, in fact, exactly what I had already done. A few months later, through Daniel, I learned that Christine's parents had offered to contribute to Lily's college fund and had asked about the trust my attorney had set up. Daniel mentioned it in a phone call, carefully, as if testing the ground. He said Christine wanted to know if there was a way to coordinate the funds, to consolidate them somewhere more accessible. I said, "The trust is set up exactly as I intend it. Lily will have access when she's 22. He was quiet. I said, "Daniel, I love you. That has not changed, but some things have. I still see Lily. That part I protected carefully. We have a standing call on Sunday evenings, and twice a year she visits me in Dayton, just her, on the train, which she thinks is an adventure. She is 10 now, and she still asks me questions that adults have stopped wondering about. Last month, she asked me why some people are kind and some people are not, whether it's something they're born with or something that happens to them. I thought about it for a while before I answered. I said I thought it was mostly neither. Mostly it was what people chose, over and over in small moments, until the choosing became habit and the habit became who they were. She thought about that. Then she said, "You're kind." I said, "I try to be." She said, "I'm going to try too." I held on to that for a long time after we hung up. I don't know what Daniel and Christine's life looks like now from the inside. I know what it looks like from where I stand. A family building something on a foundation I quietly laid, in a house they have decided I make uncomfortable. I hope they are happy. I mean that. I hope my son is proud of himself for reasons that don't require erasing where he came from. But I am done being invisible in exchange for being included. I am 64 years old. I worked for 31 years. I gave what I gave because I wanted to, and I do not regret a dollar of it. But I am not a resource. I am not a background figure. I am not something to be managed before a dinner party so the guests don't get the wrong impression. I am his mother. I am Lily's grandmother. I am my mother's daughter, the one who cleaned houses until her hands gave out, who taught me to carry myself with dignity or not at all. The money in Lily's trust will be there when she's 22. My attorney made sure of it. Everything else I kept.